Notes for section 4.6. We are going to be talking about angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side, both on the same day. You've already used side, 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 angle, side, and the HL, so you've worked with 3 of them so far. Let's work with these 2 all on the same day. Take out cheat sheet 6. Cheat sheet 6, take a look at the 2 that we're looking at. Angle, side, angle. If 2 angles, and here's that word again, if 2 angles, I'm going to highlight it, and the included side of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles and the included side of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. That should sound very, very familiar, but it was side, angle, side, so the word angle and side were interchanged. If 2 sides and the included angle were congruent on one triangle. So now we have to have the included side, meaning if you draw the side that we're talking about, it has to touch both of those angles to be included. And we'll practice that. The other one is angle, angle, side. If 2 angles and a non-included side. So when you draw the side and it's not touching both angles, it's angle, angle, side. If the non-included side of one triangle are congruent to 2 angles and the same non-included side of the other, it has to be the same non-included side. They have to go in the same order. Then the triangles are congruent. How will you answer the congruence theorem? AAS, ASA. Nothing more complicated than that. So we'll start up here with the question, can the triangles be proved congruent? So we have to find out, can they even be congruent at all using any method? Side, 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 angle, side, angle, side, angle, 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 side, HL. If so, we have to state the congruent statement and the reason. Got to go ahead with the congruent statement and the reason. Go take a look at your first one. We do have given information. We have a side and we have an angle. So if we have a side and an angle, we know we're either going to go side, angle, side, or angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side. We don't know which one yet. It's definitely not side, 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 and it's not HL because we don't have a right triangle. Take a look at that diagram. Anything that you could possibly know from the diagram of how you can figure this out, and I do see a pair of vertical angles. So we have vertical angles right there. Can the triangles be congruent? Mark it appropriately, so we're marking it. And now we have to state the congruent statement and the reason. Let's come up with the reason first. We definitely marked another angle, so it's not side, angle, side. We have to decide, is it going to go angle, side, angle, or angle, angle, side? Where is that angle going to be? So I'm going to trace the side that we're talking about. If I trace this side and this side that's marked, it only touches one of the 2 angles. If we had angle, side, angle, it says 2 angles and the included side. The included side means when you draw the side, it's going to be between the 2 angles. It's going to touch the 2 angles. This is not. So if I look at this triangle in order, it goes angle, angle, side. Or if I look at this triangle over here, angle, angle, side. And again, you can only look at one triangle at a time. If you have to, cover up one of the triangles. Don't look at it. Cover up one of the triangles so that you're only looking at angle, angle, side. So definitely the one that we're going to use is angle, angle, side. Because we know we're going to use angle, angle, side, we have to come up with now the congruent statement. Pick any order that you want for this triangle. I'm going to go triangle EFG. Is congruent to triangle. Don't forget your triangle symbols. Now it matters. EFG has to match. What angle is congruent to angle E? Angle J. What angle is congruent to angle F? The one not marked. Angle H. And which angle is congruent to angle EGF over here? HGJ over there, which means the G's match up with each other. So it says, if so, state the congruent statement and the reason, but you also had to mark the triangles congruent. If you don't mark these 2 angles congruent, you didn't finish everything. Mark the triangles appropriately. All right, let's take a look at this one. We have a side. So we have a side so far, but that's all we have. We got to come up with a pair of angles, a couple pairs of angles, or a couple pairs of sides, or more angles than sides. We know nothing else about this. There's no given information here. Nothing is marked here. Looks like a parallelogram, but they didn't tell us it was a parallelogram. The only thing we can come up with on here is the other side. So we've got side, side. We don't have an angle in between, no vertical pairs, no anything. We don't have a third side. There's no such thing as a third side theorem. There's only a third angle theorem. So this one's a no. Not enough information. Not nearly enough information for that. Try this one. This one's got a lot going on. First of all, it has parallel markings. Those are not congruent markings. You can't go up there and be like, oh, those are congruent because they told me they were congruent. That's not congruent. That's parallel. Parallel and congruent are definitely not the same. I could have two segments that are parallel like this. They're definitely parallel. They're definitely not congruent. So don't use congruent marks there. It only has parallel. Okay? We can do the really obvious one that we keep using over and over. Side ZW is congruent to side ZW by the reflexive property. So I can do a single mark there. So I know I have a side. Can I come up with a couple of angles or a couple of sides to go with that? Using parallel, as soon as you see those parallel markings, you should jump to cheat sheet 7. If two lines are parallel, 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 we either need to have corresponding angles, alternate interior or alternate exterior angles to prove congruent. We don't need supplementary. That's not going to help us. So can we find corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior angles? Hopefully you were good at this in chapter 3. We find angle 1 up here congruent to angle 4 by alternate interior angles. Because the upper and lower lines are parallel, we have alternate interior angles. We also have, oops, I erased my reflexive property somehow. We also have angle 2 congruent to angle 3 because we have another pair of parallel lines, and if you want to turn and look at it like this, we have two parallel lines and a transversal going through them, which makes alternate interior angles. So twice we have a pair of congruent angles by alternate interior angles. Now again, we're going to look at just one triangle. I see that we have a side and two angles. It's either going to be angle, angle, side, or angle, side, angle. That whole clue to figure out which one is which is, can you name, is that an included side or is it not an included side? I'm going to try to highlight, or we'll just make it nice and thick, the side. I'm looking at triangle UZW. I'm only looking at the top triangle right now. If I highlight this side, it definitely touches both this angle and this angle, which means it is the included side. We have angle, side, angle. State the congruent statement. First triangle, I can call it anything I want. I'm going to go with UZW. No, I'm going to go with WUZ, so I can say was. Was. Do you guys know about Fuzzy Wuzzy? Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. Fuzzy Wuzzy had no hair. Fuzzy Wuzzy wasn't very fuzzy, was he? It's one of my favorites. So was, I'm going to go triangle WUZ. And triangle, I got to go see what matches with my W. Let's see if I can get all this extra black stuff out of here. You can do that on a smartboard. You can't do it on your paper. So angle W on this triangle has a double arc mark. On this triangle, angle 2 has a double arc mark. So that's going to go with Z. Notice the Z's don't automatically match up. Angle U does not have a congruent arc mark. Either does angle X. So those must line up. And the angle Z on the first triangle has a single arc. So does angle W on the second triangle. There's your congruent statement with a reason of angle, side, angle. Makes sense. If I took this triangle and spun it around, it would have fit in there. All right, let's try this one. This is what a proof would look like in your assignment. They always give you all this given list and then they tell you what you're going to prove. I'm telling you right here in blue that you have to use angle side angle. If you are told you have to use angle side angle, we've got to find two angles and a side. They gave us one side. Segment BD is congruent to segment CB. So we've got one pair of sides. We have to come up with the other angles. And notice here, they marked for us parallel lines. These lines are parallel. Okay, as soon as you know parallel, you know you've got to have a pair of corresponding alternate interior, alternate exterior. I dare you to find me one where they actually have exterior angles. It is very, very rare. It happens, but it's rare. When we have two parallel lines like that and a transversal going through, we have a pair of alternate interior angles. The issue is we have two pair of alternate interior angles. We could go this direction, D with C, and we can also go this direction, A with E. We have to decide which pair we want. We cannot go with both in this case because it wants angle, side, angle. The side that we're talking about is side DB. Side DB on this side, which means we have to touch both angles. This side has to touch both angles to be an included side. So we need angle, side, angle. Cannot use angle A and angle E. They're not going to help us. They were not connected to the included side. So instead, we have to say, well, then I need this angle ABD up here to be congruent to this angle CBE. Provide the two missing statements with their reasons. I just provided the two sets of missing tick marks with their reasons, but not the statements. We already know our congruent statement. We already know our reasons. So we have the final answer. We've got to come up with the missing parts. So the first thing that we marked was the given information. We know segment DB is congruent to segment BC. Second thing we marked was that angle D was congruent to angle C. Why were those congruent? Because of alternate interior angles. Then we also decided, nope, we can't mark angle A and angle E. We got rid of those. We wanted angle side angle, so we marked this angle B. Don't call it angle B. How do I know which angle B you want? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 different angle B's. If you're working with this angle B over here on the left triangle, which you have to because you got to keep them all in order, it'll be angle ABD or angle DBA, but you have to have that B in the middle. Is congruent to over here. Keep the B vertex in the middle. CBE. Angle CBE is okay. Angle EBC is also okay. Why are those two congruent to each other? Vertical angles. Vertical angles. So this time we had to find those missing statements. Here's the statements. Here's their reasons. We already have the congruent statement and the reason for the final answer. These are we're just going to keep practicing so that you get used to them. See a bunch of different diagrams. Which method can be used to prove the triangle is congruent? Mark the triangles appropriately, state the congruent statement and the reason. So we need the congruent statement and the reason, but we also have to mark the triangle. The only given information that we have is that angle B and angle D are right angles. Got it. That kind of gives me a hint. Right angles. There is a theorem or postulate that has right angles and right triangles in it. Let's see if we can use it. We also know that segment AC is congruent to segment AC by the reflexive property. All we have to do is mark the triangles. It doesn't say that we have to make a list of all the missing information. Third thing that we have to come up with is either another side, if we're looking for hypotenuse leg, because right now we have a hypotenuse, we have a right triangle, we just need a leg, and some of you would be tempted to say, oh look right there, those are congruent because they're parallel. No, they're not. Parallel and congruent have nothing to do with each other. So you cannot mark that pair of legs. I have no reason that these pair of legs are congruent. So even though this was a clue of like, hey, we could use hypotenuse leg, all we have is the hypotenuse. We don't have a leg. Got to go a different route. Take a look. If you were given parallel lines, as soon as you see these parallel triangles, without a doubt, no question, you're going to jump to cheat sheet 7 and try to find corresponding alternate interior or alternate exterior angles. And in this case, we have, make sure that you mark the correct ones. They have to line up with the parallel line. We have that angle, BCA, congruent to angle CAD. So there is a pair of congruent angles by alternate interior angles. Now we should have enough information. We don't have congruent sides or angles here yet, but we do know from cheat sheet 4, go look at cheat sheet 4, all right angles are congruent. So if you want to put a double congruent mark there, you could, because it said all right angles are congruent. That's a theorem, right angles congruence theorem. Luckily, we don't have to write all this information. All it wants us is to mark it properly, congruent statement and reason. So now we're going to give our congruent triangles. First one we can call whatever we want, so I'm going to call it A, B, C. It's easy as 1, 2, 3. Okay, Jackson 5. Just quick reference. A, B, C, I'm going to put it in order. Careful you don't match up the A's because they don't actually match up. The A from this triangle matches with the C from that triangle. The B from this triangle has a double arc with the D over there, and the C on the top triangle has a single arc, as does the A on the bottom triangle. Triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CDA, and our reason is, I'm going to trace this side. It only touches one of the angles right here, which means it is not an included side. If it's not an included side, it's angle, angle, side. Or we could just kind of count or look. We go from A to S. Angle, side, angle. That's what they're asking for when they say state the congruent statement and the reason. We have 2 left. Notes are getting a little bit long, but I didn't want to only show you just like 1 or 2 examples and then you go see all these other examples and you're totally screwed up like, I don't get it, I don't know how to do that. I want to show you a whole bunch of different scenarios. I've showed you the parallel lines. I've showed you the right triangle, even when we don't need a right triangle. There's been vertical angles. Reflexive property gets used over and over and over. So the more you see, the better chance you have of recognizing something. Again, which method can be used to prove the triangle is congruent? Are we going to use side, side, side? Side, angle, side. Angle, side, angle. Angle, angle, side. Or HL. I feel like we should call that the HL theorem. So we could call it like HLT, but they don't. So we need one of those. Mark the triangles, state the congruent statement and the reasons. So we don't need all of the whole list of reasons, we just need to mark the triangles. I see we have an angle already, so we're not using side, side, side. I don't see a right triangle anywhere, so we're not using HL. Sometimes that might be your best method, is process of elimination, rather than just come up from it from scratch. We do have a side. We do have a side here. If you trace that side, and I'll use my big black pen again, if you trace that side of this triangle, it is not touching the angle that we have. If I trace this side, it's not touching the angle that we have. Therefore, I already know it is not an included side. You can't use an included side if the side that you have isn't part of the angle that you have. So now we're down to side, angle, side, or angle, angle, side. Can we come up with a side that's congruent, or can we come up with an angle? And hopefully you recognize these right away. We have a pair of vertical angles. Pair of vertical angles, a side that is not included. If it were included, it would be this little tiny side in between. Angle, side, angle, angle, side, angle. But it's not. We don't have that. So it's angle, angle, side is our reason. Congruent statement. I'm going to go with triangle ABC because I still have that song in my head. is congruent to triangle A, B, C. A matches E. B matches D. And this time C does match C by the angle-angle side postulate. All right, one more. Take a look at it. Same instructions. We just have to mark it up and do it. That looks like right triangles. Look at this corner. It's perfectly 90 degrees. Is not 90 degrees. Unless it puts a little mark right, oh, this is hard. Unless it puts a little mark right there by the N or right there by the H. That is not a 90-degree angle. It just looks like a 90-degree angle. It might be 89.9 degrees. The only thing we have is our angle here, and our side, and our side. If we already know that we have an angle and a side, we do not have SSS, we don't have HL. Hey look, this is almost getting used as much as reflexive property. We have another pair of vertical angles. When you have vertical angles, you know that they're congruent. We know that we have two angles and a side, so we either have angle, side, angle, or two angles and a side. Stop guessing and saying like, oh, I got a 50-50 chance, now I'm getting it right. All you gotta do is trace the side, see if it touches both angles. My side only touches one angle, which means it's not included. It comes after the angles. Go ahead and make a congruent statement. Triangle TNS is congruent to triangle. What matches the T? The U. What matches the N? The H. What matches the S? The S on the other side. Angle, angle, side. That's what you're working on. That's our proof of proving triangles congruent. This is section 4.6, so know that most of your answers, as you already noticed, are coming up with angle, side, angle, and angle, angle, side, but that doesn't mean that not all of them are. So good luck, read the directions carefully. Are they asking for a reason or are they asking for a congruent statement?